Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Wildflower Church. It is so great to see you all today. I think I have an echo on my phone. It's a new phone. We're running a little late this morning, a lot of technical glitches, and that's just one of them. So anyway, great to see you all today. Here. I think we're good now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? What? A little closer to the mic. All right, my name is Kathy Kramer. My pronouns are she and her, and I, along with Dee Adams and Corey Lemoyne, are your lay worship leaders this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a theologically diverse religion that encourages people to seek their own spiritual path. Wildflower Church has been in South Austin for over 20 years, and our mission is growing spiritually together, spreading love, justice, and joy. At this time, we are lay-led, which means we are predominantly led by volunteers from the church. We're also grateful to have part-time pastoral care support from Chaplain Kai Flannery, as well as community ministry from Reverend Aaron Walter. Today's service is about forgiveness, and we are so fortunate to be able to hear from 4 of our church members today: Sky Howell, Lisa Carroll, Sheila Ray, and Ross Jones. Sky will be joining us on video, while Lisa, Sheila, and Ross share in person. Midway through our service, we'll have our joys and concerns. As the service progresses, feel free to use the slip of paper handed to you at the door to write something that is on your heart. More paper slips will be passed out at that time if you didn't get one. Not everyone will have something to share, so don't feel obligated to write anything. As always, those on Zoom can write in the chat when the time comes. This is an opportunity to have our community hold something that is in your heart. For those of you on Zoom, please note that the way to use the closed caption function of Zoom and information about our recording of services is in the chat. And now, before we settle into worship, we have Community Matters with Board President Adam Hegemeyer.
Good morning. My name is Adam Hegemeyer. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the president of the Wildflower Board of Trustees. And today, for Community Matters, I got 2 things for you. First up, write them down on my phone so I don't lose them. The past few years have revealed cracks in our foundation as a congregation. Much like a home is in need of repair, we each have a role in rebuilding the foundation as we continue to live in our spiritual home. Passing the 8th principle was a first step in this process. The next phase is continuing to build on that work and build on the work of the 8th principle task force by supporting our congregation with reaching a critical mass for engaging in this foundational work and in building understanding. Some of you may have already started this journey by attending beloved conversations beyond diversity or enduring racism or another anti-racist workshop. Sky, Kristen, and Dee, who are coordinating Wildflowers Living into our 8th principle, encourage you to register for Jubilee, April 1st through 3rd. This training will be facilitated by Paula Cole-Jones, who has been a significant force in the drafting and advocating for the 8th principle adoption across the Unitarian Universalist Association. There is a cost for this training of $170, and if you need help defraying some of those costs, there is a small amount of money aside to help with that. If you need that assistance, you can contact office@wildflowerchurch.org. Otherwise, details are in the newsletter for how to register to join. Also, starting next Sunday in the morning, you can join Adrian Lemoyne and Chaplain Kai for a Zoom watch party and a series of 5 discussions around comedian Julia Sweeney's Letting Go of God. They'll talk about their journeys of faith and be invited to consider how belief and religion have evolved for each of us personally throughout our lives. There'll be a time to explore our personal histories and get to know one another's beliefs and personal journeys. Atheists and theists, welcome. We'll all have our own spiritual journeys there. And look forward to seeing you. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact the board at wildflowerchurch.org. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Corey Lemoyne. My pronouns are he and him. For our call to worship today, we have a poem written by Kathy Cartwright Chow entitled A Place to Forgive and to Be Forgiven. The chat with the title and author will be placed in the chat for those of you at home. It should be up on the screen in just a moment. There we go. A place to be forgiven and to forgive and be forgiven. For those who have hurt in any way, whether through words or deeds or thought, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the excuses we have made just to be right, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the blame we have placed on someone else again and again, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For passing up the opportunity to help because we were afraid, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For hiding the truth from someone, here is a place to forgive and be forgiven. For working beyond the anger and resentment, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the times I have not felt heard, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. Forgiveness is never easy, whether for yourself or someone else. Here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. And now for our chalice lighting. In Unitarian Universalist churches, we light a chalice when we come together to worship. If you have a chalice at home, you might choose to light yours now, or you can make the chalice hand sign. Nayeli will be helping us this morning with lighting our chalice in the sanctuary. Thank you, Nayeli. I'll read our chalice lighting words that should be on the slide in just a second. With the kindling of this flame, we affirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude and use them to bless the world in the spirit of love and forgiveness. Our opening hymn this morning is hymn number 1037. We begin in love. Dee will narrate the hymn and the choir will sing the response. The slide will have the words to both.
For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. for each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
I'm going to share this morning's land and ancestor acknowledgement. We are here today honoring our elders, our ancestors, those who will become ancestors, and the land. We do a land and ancestor acknowledgement because it is important to remember this historic land and the harm caused by the white settler colonial project on the indigenous residents of Turtle Island. We also lift up the ongoing presence, guidance, and leadership of indigenous people among us today. This acknowledgement is just one very small step in beginning in right relationship with each other and the land we are on, and one step toward repair. The second step is to materially support the vision and struggles of indigenous people for self-determination and reclamation of land and land sites. We in Central Austin are living on the unceded territory of 17 tribal nations or locally recognized tribes. I invite you to say now the names of the tribes who called this home. Just call them out. Kawiltakan. Thank you. We honor them and acknowledge the violence that has been and is perpetrated on them. Also, say some names of those you know who are indigenous, have indigenous heritage, who live here today. So let's take a collective breath as we honor their lives, the harm they continue to experience, and the gifts they bring. The prosperity of this country on indigenous land across time has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered and continue to suffer the harms of institutionalized slavery Jim Crow laws, and the modern prison industrial complex. We are all indebted to that labor and sacrifice, and we acknowledge the trauma that has been carried forward in anti-Blackness today. I invite you to share the names of those you know who are descendants of those who were enslaved. Nakia. Thank you. Let us take another collective breath as we honor their lives, the harm they continue to experience, and the gifts they bring. We also recognize the exploitation of many people who were brought to or came to this land and were engaged in creating wealth for the dominant culture. I invite you to share the names of those ancestors, descendants, or current people who were or have been exploited. This may also be your name. Michelle. Again, let's breathe together as we honor their lives, the harm many continue to experience, and the gifts they bring. Our ancestors may have been part of the colonizing of Turtle Island and may have been those who resisted and continue to do so. Let's take a collective breath, holding them in forgiveness if we can, and acknowledge those who resisted. We recognize that the process of colonization is ongoing and we all play our part. We commit to the labor of consciousness that envisions a new and different future, a future where we can experience collective liberation. I invite you now to take another deep breath and just feel where that resides in your body and be grateful for that breath. Let's breathe in the joy and awareness we want to pass on to our descendants and breathe out the apologies and forgiveness we wish to bestow. This is the most basic and simple thing we can do as a community. Just breathe together. Thank you. And now is the time for all ages. Today, we're going to hear how Zyla and Kai Cantu and their mama Lita Noel work through times of conflict using a 4-step apology process. It is not always easy to move into a conflict. I am sure that all of us can think of times when we have been upset with somebody who's hurt us, who has hurt our feelings or done or said something that's made us angry or sad or feeling bad. And that's the apology process there that you're going to see. Or when we know that we have been the one who has said something or done something we think may have hurt someone. Melita tells me that when they're in conflict in their family, that the 4 prompts that are up there help them to find their way back into relationship with one another and creates the possibility of forgiveness. Zai and Kai, there we go. Zyla and Kai Cantu will now show us their family apology process.
Chomp.
Ow, you bit me. I feel like I want an apology from you.
Okay, should I do our special apology?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry for biting you. It was wrong because you didn't do anything to deserve that and it hurt you. In the future, I will talk about why I feel like I want to bite you. Are you willing to be in a relationship with me?
Yes.
Yay, let's hug.
But what if you're not willing to be in a relationship?
Great question, faceless director. No, I'm the director. We did used to have it be, do you accept my apology? But
And will you forgive me?
will you forgive me? But we thought about it and we realized that sometimes you're not immediately ready to forgive someone, but rather asking if you're willing to be in a relationship with that person gives you the space to work towards being forgiving of them.
And does that work better?
I think it does.
I agree.
Thank you, Zyla and Kai and Polly and who's that?
Liz.
Strawberry.
And Rose. Thank you.
Bye.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
That was us singing the children out. So kids, time to go to your classes. As we say in our covenant, this beloved community is our spiritual home. We all share our gifts to build it. To build this community, we rely on financial contributions that come from your sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure that the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and vision of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. If you are a first-time visitor, your presence is your gift to us. For those of you here in the sanctuary, we invite you to share your gifts in the baskets that will be passed around. You may also use the text or online options. The ways to do this will appear on the screen here in the sanctuary, as well as on Zoom and in the chat for those of you at home. Thank you so much for your generosity. Our reading today is To Forgive by Desmond Tutu, a South African bishop and theologian who received the Nobel Peace Prize for his opposition to apartheid. To forgive is not just to be altruistic. It is the best form of self-interest. It is also a process that does not exclude hatred and anger. These emotions are all part of being human. You should never hate yourself for hating others who do terrible things. The depth of your love is shown by the extent of your anger. However, when I talk of forgiveness, I mean the belief that you can come out the other side a better person than the one being consumed by anger and hatred. Remaining in that state locks you in a state of victimhood, making you almost dependent on the perpetrator. If you can find it in yourself to forgive, then you no longer are chained to the perpetrator. You can move on, and you can even help the perpetrator to become a better person too. But the process of forgiveness also requires acknowledgement on the part of the perpetrator that they have committed an offense.
So as we do each Sunday, we now enter into the space in the service for our joys and concerns. Feel free to use the slip of paper that was handed out at the door to write something that is on your heart. If you did not get a slip of paper and would like one, please raise your hand and a greeter will assist you. If you're on Zoom, please use the chat function to share your joys and concerns. Not everyone will have something to share, so don't feel obligated to write anything, but we would love to hear those that are on your heart. Also know that our pastoral care chaplain, Kai Flannery, is available to support you. Their email is pastoralcare@wildflowerchurch.org, and this information will also be in the chat.
From Wendy, Ike and I are grateful to be in Columbia, South Carolina, visiting his parents this weekend. It is a joy to share space with them.
Every day, just doing one thing is so hard. Life is overwhelming. Mark.
From Susie, joy, squeezing in an online yoga class before joining everyone today in worship.
A friend is having cancer surgery April 7th. Let's hold them in our hearts.
Joyful for the sun.
I write a poem to a good friend and she loved it. Ross Jones.
From Mark, every day just doing one thing is so hard. Life is overwhelming.
Being in service in person and training Matt as a new tech person. Yippee!
From Melita, joy. We visited the AISD Pride Parade yesterday, and it was quite uplifting to see defiance of our governor and attorney general and to see old friends and colleagues. Amen.
Yeah. Joy to celebrate a new baby later today at a baby shower. Concern at the hate towards the LGBTQ community lately from Texas leadership. Kim, thank you.
Healing, joy, and a little bit of a concern. Oh, you're done? Grateful to be together again.
Okay, so I'm going to put one last pebble in the bowl for all the joys and concerns that you hold in your hearts. And we as a community hold all your joys and concerns with care and love. It takes a village to have a service. This prayer was written by Mofo Tutu, who's Desmond Tutu's daughter and who's also a Christian minister. Prayer before prayer. I want to be willing to forgive, but I dare not ask for the will to forgive. In case you give it to me and I'm not yet ready. I am not yet ready for my heart to soften. I am not yet ready to be vulnerable again. Not yet ready to see that there's humanity in my tormentor's eyes, or that the one who hurt me also cried. I am not yet ready for the journey. I'm not yet interested in the path. I am at the prayer before the prayer of forgiveness. Grant me the will to want to forgive. Grant me not yet, but soon. Just let's breathe again as a community together. Breathing in the complexities of forgiveness and breathing out the opportunity for that. Blessed be and amen.
It is now time for our reflections. We'll begin with Lisa, who will be followed by Sky, Ross, and then Sheila, each sharing their struggle with forgiveness in different ways. Between the reflections, the choir will sing the response from our opening hymn as an interlude. Lisa?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. So I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time regretting things I did and didn't do over my lifetime, things I didn't say or did say, and even dreams that I never pursued. One of these regrets stems from a college class where I directed a couple of short plays drawn from books we read as part of that class. I love the creative process involved in parsing out pieces of the stories to create a short play and then directing my fellow students to act them out. I dreamed of doing more of that. And yet, in a town where there's so many opportunities, I never pursued that dream. So when I was working full-time and raising my son, I didn't have a lot of time to dwell on regrets. So they mostly resided under the surface without being noticed or addressed. But then my son grew up and left home. I lost my job, and that was followed by the pandemic and the associated isolation that came with that. During that time, I moved back into my house that I'd been renting, then turned around several months later and ended up selling it to purchase and move into a motorhome. When it first looked like the pandemic was easing, I took off on my own and traveled solo throughout the eastern United States to the southernmost tip and then up to northern Maine before heading back to Austin. Upon my return, COVID was peaking again, and I was living alone in my motorhome in a beautiful but pretty isolated spot out in Dripping Springs. So it didn't take long before I began feeling more isolated and alone than I'd ever felt in my life. With all that time alone, those regrets that I had so skillfully avoided began to rise to the surface and torment me without mercy. Along with those regrets came fears of what the future held. And I believed every story that fear told me. I put my trust in an emotion, one that is supposed to warn us of impending danger when exercised with awareness, but unchecked can lead to depression and anxiety. Quickly, I drew I was anguished, but anxious and depressed to an extent that became quite debilitating. On top of that, I beat myself up for allowing my mental health to deteriorate to the point that it had. I thought that I should have been able to manage better. I've been in therapy and self-help groups for years, so I had the tools. All I needed was to just work a little harder. It was excruciating to start with, and I made it even worse. So this is where forgiveness comes in. Self-forgiveness has been the pathway out of the darkness and despair. Forgiveness for the harm I caused myself by dwelling on my regrets, and forgiveness for imagining a future that ended with me being alone and destitute. The stories I had been telling myself, and they were not the happily ever after kind, had almost convinced me that my life wasn't worth living. Convinced me that this one wild and precious life that Mary Oliver wrote so eloquently about wasn't worth living. So, I consider myself a very forgiving, compassionate person who doesn't hold grudges and is able to find even compassion for those who may have caused me harm. But self-forgiveness, now that is a lot harder and requires much more effort for me than forgiving others. I have to be willing to see where my expectations towards myself might be unreasonable. I have to let myself off the hook when I don't measure up to my idealized self-image. I have to allow myself to be more generous in my estimation of my worth and value in the world at large and with my friends and family. So in 12-step programs, there is a step about making a list of people you have harmed and making amends to them. What I want to leave with you today is that we need to put ourselves at the top of that list because we have often caused more harm to ourselves than to others. Self-forgiveness is the key to undoing that harm. So thank you very much for letting me share part of my story today. Blessed be.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Bonjour, Indesnaka Sky Howell, Badwadwadmi, Ottawa, Endau. My name is Sky Howell of the Potawatomi and Ottawa Tribal Nations. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. It is an honor to be in community with you all today. Please note in my reflection today, I will reference being a survivor of trauma. Please care for yourself in the ways that are needed. Forgiveness is becoming untethered, a process of letting go and becoming unraveled, while simultaneously weaving a new tapestry of grace, compassion, boundaries, and accountability. When asked about my perspective on forgiveness, this is what comes to mind for me. I grew up believing in a fairy tale kind of forgiveness that seems to assume that things will be okay if only the person harmed can be the bigger person and let it go. In my family, we didn't talk about harm. I now reject the fairy tale version of forgiveness. It is not a standalone action. It must be intrinsically connected to compassion for oneself and others, and to grace. In my forgiveness, I hold grace for my family. Brene Brown says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, forgiveness toward my abuser was an act of letting go of my hopes for a normal childhood, creating boundaries to put an end to a toxic relationship that only fueled anger and self-sabotaging behavior for myself. Forgiveness was an act of healing and compassion to create and maintain healthy and functional relationships for myself and for my son to thrive. Forgiveness was an act of creating art as a place to leave my hurt so I could move forward. Forgiveness is the constant reminder I am no longer tethered to a reality in which I have no control over. Forgiveness is a spiritual practice of ending generational trauma and a daily affirmation that I am thriving, I am healthy, and I am loved. When I consider forgiveness as it relates to racial healing, and particularly as more bodies of Native children are recovered from boarding schools, I am further convinced that grace, compassion, and particularly Accountability and boundaries are necessary to achieve forgiveness. We must seek to understand the truth with an empathetic understanding of our shared history before we can move forward toward reconciliation. As we strive toward our own journey toward healing from the great losses of this global pandemic, healing from all the many ways we experience oppression in its many forms in the communities we are a part of, and healing from the past harms within our spiritual community, where might we find forgiveness? Latasha Morrison, author of Be the Bridge, Pursuing God's Heart for Racial Reconciliation, says that bridge builders don't deny hurt. They experience it, sit in it, feel it, but they don't stay in that pain. They don't allow those who've wounded them to control them or constantly drive them back to anger and resentment. Instead, they allow that pain to continually push them into forgiveness. How can we become bridge builders who work to access collective forgiveness through a process that honors the truth of our shared history and experiences, that seeks to understand what is needed for reconciliation? What will we need to let go of? What will we need to hold on to? How will our forgiveness be connected to grace, compassion, boundaries, and accountability? I invite you all to take a collective breath in of compassion and grace for yourself and wherever you may be on your healing journey toward forgiveness in all the many ways that are known and unknown. As you exhale, have reverence for your ancestors who have carried you on your journey, for the spiritual community that you are a part of, and for the generations to come who will thrive from our collective healing. Megwetch.
Ourselves and each other, we begin again in love.
Hello, my name's Ross Jones, and my wife is Sarah Duke. We've both been members for quite a few years, and in fact, met here in church and got married in this church back on April 11th, 2015. Sarah developed at a very early age, in her early 50s, a very rare form of Alzheimer's that tends to attack young people. It's called PCA, posterior cortical atrophy Alzheimer's. And that basically is the first part of the brain that gets attacked. And that's the visual area that also gets involved in math, reading, writing, colors, movement, distance, many, many aspects of vision that most people don't really realize. All the things that that area of the brain interprets with the signals from the eye. I knew that she had this disease before we got married. And she even, asked me why I wanted to marry her. And the answer is real simple. It's just I loved her. But over the years, the disease gets worse, of course. And not only does it affect vision and all of those areas, but then it starts affecting cognitive ability. Though the early years were very good, we took a lot of trips because that's what we both wanted to do and enjoyed things. But right before COVID, things got to be more difficult for her. And we had to stop our travel, and I eventually had to retire. She retired very early. Luckily, she'd worked for the state for many years. And then I retired to take care of her. In the beginning, it's not too difficult to be a caregiver, but as the disease progresses, everything piles up. Besides having to take care of the entire household, you have to take care of the entire person. You know, feeding them, bathing them, dressing them, every aspect. And one difficulty I have is I've got a pretty poor spine that keeps me in pain most of the time. By last summer, things had gotten to be pretty difficult for me. Luckily, I have a very loving daughter who knows me very well and lives in the Austin area, and a very good friend who I've known for over 35 years. And even though she lives in Oklahoma, she knows me well, and we communicate a lot. The two of them really helped me make the decision that I could no longer take care of Sarah because it was affecting me emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And you just can't give the degree of care that you would like. I found a very nice small place in Kyle near where I live and got her in admitted. The amount of guilt in doing that is tremendous. It's not something that you want to do, but you have to. What I've realized in the 6 months that she's been in there is that when I go visit, I'm visiting her. I'm not physically taking care of her, feeding her, giving her medication. Excuse me. I'm just there with her. I've learned to forgive myself, in part because things are really better. She's actually happier. I'm happier. For over 2 years, we didn't leave the house, essentially, except to see a doctor. You know. So self-forgiveness is very important. Thank you very much.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Thank you. I've been having a lot of trouble hearing this morning. I hope you can hear me. Can you? Okay. First of all, I'll tell you that my name is Sheila Ray. and my pronouns are she and her. I feel such gratitude and such love for everybody who's shared today. You guys have known me for a long time, and you've heard me share all kinds of personal things. And here I go again. The service I led 6 weeks ago on the topic of romantic love did touch on, among other things, the need to forgive and be forgiven, and to forgive yourself. There are countless poems, novels, essays, movies, etc., which have the theme of forgiveness. But today I want to reflect on a very painful struggle I'm having with the serious estrangement of my 2 adult children, David and Matt. There's apparently not forgiveness on the horizon, but we can still hope. Those of you who have experienced this as well understand this deep sadness. I've sought help from my therapist and lots of websites for solutions and lots of friends who've been through this before. Guess what? There's absolutely no way I can solve, mend, or otherwise fix this. It boils down to one sentence: stay out of it. The unhealthy fantasies I have for this is preaching. Someday you'll regret this, and it may be too late. How would you feel if your children did this over some toxic grudge? How about when someone you both love dearly dies? But guilt trips might make the situation even worse. The universal advice is something that I'm already doing right, and that is to continue to develop and maintain a relationship with each of them separately. Let them know they are each deeply loved. That's it. Sum of life, spirit of life and love, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. My beloved sister-in-law, Sarah, says, patience and love are hard. I hold you all in my heart and in my prayers.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Thank you all for your reflections, Lisa and Ross and Sky, who's not with us, and Sheila. Thank you so much. Very powerful. So our hymn, the closing hymn today is number 323, Break Not the Circle, sung by our choir, and they will sing just the first verse this morning. Here we go.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not the circle, make it wider still, till it includes embraces all the living.
Pardon me while I find my spot. Kathy had it just right where I needed it. All right, as I extinguish our chalice, I invite you to do the same at home for those of you. As we go to end our service, we'd like to leave you with this prayer for our closing words. We pray for the power to be gentle, the strength to be forgiving, the patience to be understanding, and the endurance to accept the consequences of holding on to what we believe to be right. May we put our trust in the power of good to overcome evil and the power of love to overcome hatred. We pray for the vision to see and the faith to believe in a world emancipated from violence, a new world where fear shall no longer lead people to commit injustice, nor selfishness make them bring suffering to others. Help us to devote our whole life and thought and energy to the task of making peace, praying always for the inspiration and the power to fulfill the destiny for which we and all people were created. Author unknown, offered by Beth Amiot. Amen and blessed be. As you leave the service today, we encourage you to ponder the themes of forgiveness and accountability from our reflections as you go about your day and your week. We invite you to stay for conversation in the community room, the courtyard, our small groups on Zoom. Chairs in the community room are arranged in small groups, and you may bring a chair out for use on the cement. You may also have brought your own chair or blanket for the grassy areas if you'd like. Please be mindful of masking and social distancing and enjoy this time to reconnect. I will be making small groups at Matt and I in a moment on Zoom after the service ends, and feel free to listen to the postlude and leave the sanctuary as you are moved to do so, being mindful of maintaining social distance. There will be a little bit of food out there as well. Have a wonderful rest of your day.